friends. It's time for another cork-popping edition of Spin the Bottle. I am your host for the evening, America's uncommon wine expert, Chris Kern, and we are joined, as we always are, by our premier crew cuvée of wine experts from around the country. So without further ado, let's spin the bottle and meet them tonight, shall we? We'll start up in the upper right-hand corner there with a lovely lady from from San Francisco, by way of LA, I should say. She is the co-owner of the Barrel Room Wine Bar in San Francisco. If you have not been to the Barrel Room, you absolutely need to check it out the next time you are in the city by the bay. But if you can't make it to San Francisco, definitely check out her blog at barrelroomsf.com. She blogs about all sorts of uncommon and unconventional wines from all over the world. And I think she's celebrating a special day today. It is Sarah Trubnick. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great.
Good. And what do you have in your glass? What is your birthday wine for the evening?
I have my birthday celebration wine. I am drinking a delicious Chateau Rieux Sec Sauterne from my birth year, 1979.
Oof, that sounds fantastic, although we won't get into birth years because suddenly you're making me feel old. All right. Sarah, we're glad to have you aboard for your first Spin the Bottle. And we'll spin the bottle now to have it point far, far east to our main man in D.C. He blogs at Cork Envy and is also the creator and star of the weekly Wine with Stub. If you have not watched that yet, definitely check it out. It's available on corkenvy.com every Friday, if I'm not mistaken. He is our main man in the D.C. area. A little bummed that the O's and Nats got knocked out of the playoffs, but seems to be coping well nonetheless. He goes by one name, Stub. How are you, my friend?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me. Sarah, happy birthday to you, and glad to have you on the panel for the first time. Excellent. I am drinking tonight a 2009 Ducard Vineyards Petit Verdot from right here in Virginia.
Virginia wine, perhaps a little bit of foreshadowing going on there. Interesting. We'll have to make note of that, yes. And last but certainly not least, in the lower left-hand corner, coming to us from Los Angeles, California, she is our curvy bottle of rosé wine, the ginger snap that puts a little hop in all of our steps. She is Clear Channel Radio's wine correspondent on The Dish. She also blogs at vinylvixen.wordpress.com. She is the vinyl vixen herself, Jules Gauvin. Jules, how are you this evening?
I'm doing fabulous. I have here a to-be-opened bottle of Casa Vinicola Zonin Rosé, courtesy of their winemakers collection. I have to wait for my better half before I can pop this bottle, so I'm going to have to just wait about another hour.
Oh, that is...
So cheers, everyone. Happy birthday, Sarah.
That's never, ever fun to have to wait for a loved one to open a bottle. You should be selfish and open it now.
I can't do that.
All right. Well, are we all ready to tackle some of the questions and talk a little bit about the latest going-ons in the world of wine?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Oh, and before we do, I should mention I am enjoying a Rourke Wine Company 2010 Malbec from the Happy Canyon region of Santa Barbara. It's actually 85% Malbec, 15% Cab Franc. Only about 90 cases of this wine made, but really, really delicious. Very different style California Malbec and totally off the charts from what you might have in Argentina. All right, so let's get to why we came here tonight. Let's get ready to spin the bottle, and we'll jump on our first question of the evening. Now, last week we were discussing the woes with this year's Beaujolais harvest in France, which typically acts as a barometer for how other grape harvests will turn out both in and around France and Europe. And while reports out of Spain and Italy seem to mirror the same dismal outlook as Beaujolais, with bulk wine prices down precipitously, there may be some rays of sunlight ahead. A late Indian summer condition has led to renewed optimism in Bordeaux for a last-minute burst of ripening, and some vintners are pushing off their harvest by as much as 3 weeks to allow for Merlot and Cabernet grapes to reach full ripeness. So, Based on these latest reports, are the three of you willing to reevaluate your thoughts on 2012's harvest in Europe, or are you sticking by your predictions from before? We'll start up in the lower left-hand corner with Jules Gauvin. Jules, your thoughts on Europe? You willing to change your outlook from last week?
Not necessarily. I don't really think that it's going to serve as much of a barometer for everywhere else in the world. You know, the worldwide production of wine is going to be less than it was last year. However, it's not really going to drop that much in Italy. You know, there's a significant decrease in Spain, and France overall, I think, is feeling, you know, the biggest hit. But, you know, come with this Indian summer, I think many of the grapes are going to be saved. That's going to allow for a better harvest. So I guess you can say I am slightly more optimistic.
Stub, you were bearish last week on European wines. Not a big fan of Beaujolais wines as well. Cause for renewed optimism for you?
To be fair and slight correction, I don't mind a Cru Beaujolais. I don't like the Nouveaux. But with that said, I am a little more optimistic that we will get some better wines out of the region. We may get less of them, so prices will be a little higher, which boo to that. But, you know, I'm a little more optimistic than I was even last week.
Now, Sarah, you pour lots of European wines in your bar. What are your thoughts on the French harvest, the Bordeaux harvest, and particularly the other harvest coming out of Europe?
Well, I would say that the 2012 harvest is very complex. You've got a huge drop in quantity coming out of the south of Spain, for example, where they lost 70% of their Cabernet. But at the same time, you've got very good quality potentially coming out of Burgundy. And in the Northern Rhone, they're saying that this vintage is actually as good as the 07, which they enjoyed thoroughly. However, in Bordeaux, I think that the optimism is a little bit early because it's great that the grapes went through Veraison and now they're the same color as the other grapes on the bunches since they had uneven ripening. But they are going to have a lot of green wines. They're going to have to be some pretty good winemakers to make good wine from this vintage in Bordeaux, seeing as the main varietals that have been affected all through Europe because of this weather have been Cabernet and Merlot. So I'm not optimistic about the Bordeaux vintage, but there's a lot of places in Europe that are going to do just fine.
True. Now, let me throw this out to you guys. Typically, when it's a bad year or an off vintage, while it means a huge drop in production, increased cost for the winemakers, it usually leads to a skyrocketing of wine prices. Do you see that happening with Europe and France, and particularly Spain? If, as Sarah mentioned, 70% of the crop was lost for the year? Bueller.
Well, I'll jump in there.
Yeah, exactly. So polite. Stop being polite.
I think that, so again, the grapes that were affected were really the Cabernet and Merlot grapes. I think the Tempranillo is going to be just fine. I think that Rioja is going to be pretty strong. So I don't really see a big price change except for in the south of Spain where the wines are, relatively inexpensive as they are. So I don't really see that any significant price change is going to happen in these regions.
I agree. Just because the European prices are up, that doesn't mean that the wine prices for consumers are going to go up. So I'm going to agree with Sarah.
Stub?
Well, I think as these 2012s get released, we are going to see higher prices with those 2012s than we have for the last several vintages. And I think almost necessarily from a strictly business sense, the wine producers that have made more wine, were able to make wine and save it, are going to raise their prices because demand is going to be higher.
Well, it's going to be a shame if they raise their prices in Bordeaux.
Well, it seems like Bordeaux prices only go up every year, but the question is more of the Vintable and the smaller producers coming out of both France and particular parts of Europe. A good point about the Cabernet is the Priorat region. How is that going to be affected with that type of a loss of Cabernet?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. But from reports that I've heard coming out of the east of Spain, they've managed to save a lot of the grapes. Now, how good the wine will be, I don't know, but their quantity loss isn't as much as in the south of Spain, where the heat stress just devastated all of the grapes. But again, it's the Cabernet, it's the Bordeaux varietals that are really suffering. The native varietals in both Italy and Spain are doing fine. I mean, we'll see how the wines are, but they tend to be doing much better than the Bordeaux varietals.
All right. So to wrap up this question, what I want from each of you is to tell me in 5 years' time, which country are we going to look back at and say their 2012 wines were better than the others? Will it be France? Will it be Spain? Or will it be Italy? And Sarah, let's start with you.
Do I have one country?
One out of Italy, Spain, and France.
Can I choose two regions?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm going to go with Italy. I'm going to go with Italy plus the Northern Rhone. How's that?
Italy and the Northern Rhone.
I say that Italy is going to do pretty well, except for places like Bulgaria, which are pretty dependent on those Bordeaux varietals. But the native Italian varietals are doing very well, and up in the Alto Adige, in fact, they're making fantastic wines.
Gotcha. Okay, Stub, Italy, France, Spain. Who's going to be the best of 2012?
Well, I hate to agree, but I also am going to say Italy. They're closer in production, depending on it, to France.
Oh, somehow we lost Stub from the show. Let's see if we can get him back.
I guess he didn't like the question.
I think he was just really upset about disagreeing with you, Sarah. No response. That's not cool. What did you guys say?
I have that he's trying to call.
Oh, there he is.
He's back. There he is.
Did everyone drop out or just me?
Just you.
Just you.
We thought you were intimidated.
Yeah, we figured it was another East Coast earthquake.
Not that I've felt so far. Wow,
All right.
Sorry.
So back into it, Stub. You're saying Italy?
Yeah, I would definitely say Italy. As Sarah said, their native varietals are doing much better than the classic Bordeaux varietals. I just think they're going to end up being better. They're going to probably produce more wine, period, because of that. So it's going to be more out there, and we're going to think more highly of it than we do either France or Spain.
All right. Last but not least, Jules, you've got the last word on this issue.
Well, I hate to go last on this one. Almost wish I went first, but I'm also going to have to agree and say Italy from the reports that I've read. I just think they have the best future for this harvest, and so I'm going to have to agree with the crowd.
Well, you are all correct. The answer is Italy, since they seem to be having the least reported problems of any of the other countries mentioned in that. Before we move on to our next question, just a quick note from our sponsor for the evening, ForgottenGrapes.com. If you've never visited ForgottenGrapes.com, now is a perfect time. They are an online retail wine shop specializing in wines from lesser known and uncommon varietals, regions, and producers. So a lot of the same grapes we were just talking about from France, Italy, and Spain. You can find those at ForgottenGrapes.com, along with wines from South Africa, from Australia, New Zealand, Lebanon, all parts of Eastern Europe, South America, and all throughout California, Oregon, and Washington. ForgottenGrapes.com. Drink something different. I should also mention that if you have not seen the most recent Forgotten Grape of the Fortnight video that was just released on ForgottenGrapes.com, they're spotlighting Chenin Blanc as their Forgotten Grape of the Fortnight. It is the Helen Mirren of Forgotten Grapes, and you do not want to miss, well, it's my performance as Helen Mirren accepting an award as Chenin Blanc. It is truly magical.
And you do not want to miss it.
No. Some of you have seen it. It is a little out there. But ForgottenGrapes.com, you can check that video out. Again, ForgottenGrapes.com, drink something different. All right. We are going to spin the bottle once again and jump on to our next question. Teleprompters are fun. And the question is Virginia for wine lovers? Now, earlier this month, the state of Virginia hosted their inaugural Virginia Wine Summit to kick off Virginia Wine Month. This who's who of the wine world included seminars on wine pairings, a keynote address from Stephen Spurrier, who many of you know is the esteemed editor of Decanter magazine, and other notable wine personalities in attendance. Now, in recent years, Virginia has certainly been putting out a full-court PR press to promote itself as a premier wine destination in the U.S., but it's hard to tell if the needle has been moved among your average wine drinker. Despite one of the oldest wine pedigrees in the U.S., Virginia still ranks 5th in both the number of wineries and total wine production in the U.S., still well behind the left coast trio of California, Washington, and Oregon, also trailing behind New York. So now, let me ask you, do you foresee Virginia ever moving up the U.S. wine hierarchy, either in terms of prestige or production? And what piece of advice would you give the state to help propel it forward to the next level? Since we are talking about Virginia wine, we might as well start with our Virginia wine expert, Monsieur Stub. You have the floor.
Okay. You may have to cut me off here. I have a lot to say about this. Can Virginia wine be great in the country? Absolutely. We have 210 wineries here. We have a few of those wineries making phenomenal wines. We have a greater number making excellent wines and even a greater number making very good wines. Wine can be made here. We need to get that story out. We've been named a top wine travel destination as our state. We need to get that word out. We can get there, but we'll have to deal with some issues along the way that I'll be happy to discuss in a minute.
All right. Sarah, as a wine bar owner, you get lots of different people into your shop. Ever pour any Virginia wines, and what's your thought on them?
Actually, the Barbersville Cabernet Franc is on our bottle list.
Uh-huh.
So
that's all you have to say about that.
My thought is I think there are some fantastic wines in Virginia. They certainly have had enough time to make some pretty good wines. They've been making wines since the 17th century, far earlier than California. In fact, when California started making wine and people started doubting that California could make wine, the people on the East Coast thought that the California wine was just abysmal. And they said, oh, well, they can't make the kind of wine that we can make here. So there's a lot of history to these wines. I do think that there's a problem with promoting them. And I think that doing things like by the glass pricing and these sorts of things so that retailers, so that bars like mine can pour these by the glass is the way to get the word out.
Interesting. Jules, what do you think is holding Virginia wine back? As Sarah mentioned, one of the oldest wine regions, much older than California, Oregon, and Washington, yet still ranks behind them in terms of total production.
I wouldn't necessarily say that anything is holding him back. I think Virginia Wines is really starting to, make its place on the map. I mean, it's already top 5 in the country, and I think it absolutely has the potential to move up the ranks. I mean, it's competing with some big dogs like California and Oregon, Washington, and even New York over on the East Coast, but I think that it can surpass New York, especially with all the promotion and PR work they're beginning to do with these summits, and they're having really significant figures in the wine industry come out and back them up. I think that we're going to see some great strides within the next 5 to 10 years for Virginia wine.
But really, what is it going to take to get Virginia wine up over that hump past New York, past Washington, past Oregon? Because it seems like they've been doing a lot of the same things for a while now, and even with the PR push, it really hasn't changed a lot of people's perceptions about Virginia wine. Stub, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, part of the perception of Virginia wine is it's wine from Virginia, and people don't know that it exists, and they've never had a Virginia wine. Starting with a big push in 2004 with Governor Mark Warner, he started promoting wine. He actually owned vineyard space at that time. It was private. He bottled it privately, didn't sell it for profit, but he started a big push with Virginia wine. Our current governor, Bob McDonnell, and his first lady are also big Virginia wine proponents. They called this Virginia Wine Summit, where 5 of 8 head-to-head wines, Virginia against some other region of the world, were preferred or won. However they figured that out, I think it was a raise of hands from what I'd read. We just need to get Virginia wine out of the state, and I think that's our biggest problem. We're talking a lot about it, but we're not sending it out in the world.
Can I interrupt, or is that...
No, go ahead.
That's not kosher here.
No, absolutely. We're all 100%
I I recently attended a seminar and tasting on Virginia wines, and I was really dismayed to look around at the crowd. So the crowd was all wine people, like me. And that's great, because people like me will actually buy the wine and pour it in the bar, but I don't know any other person in San Francisco who's willing to step out there and pour a Virginia wine by the glass, except for us, because we do that sort of thing.
But Sarah, hold on for a second. Isn't that what it's going to take? It's going to take trendsetters. It's going to take that first wave of early adapters like yourself.
Yes, but these people who are putting on seminars should really be doing public tastings in places like San Francisco and New York. They need to get the public to see that these wines are good, because they are good. And it's great if people like me know that they're good. But, I mean, the restaurateurs, if they're not willing to buy that bottle and pour it in their restaurant, which most of them are not, what's the point of having a big seminar with a bunch of food that we, of course, consume rapidly, and a bunch of wine that we drink as much of as possible, and then we go back to work and we talk to our friends about how cool it was. But what we need in order to get a new region on the map is for that to be in the hands of the public, not the wine people.
I can only hope that there was some Virginia ham on that menu with that tasting. But
there actually was. I ate quite a bit of it.
Not surprising at all. Now, Jules, do you think public tastings are the way to go, or do you think there's another way that Virginia can help itself to really get the word out about the quality of the wines that are coming out of the country these days?
I'd have to say it's an option. I'm going to parallel it to one of the only things I know out here in LA is the small boutique clothing companies. They put their items into the hands of a select celebrity or whomever it is that they feel can represent them well and how they want their image to be perceived. So I think that's definitely an avenue. You put some Virginia wine into people's hands that can get it out to a mass audience, and that's how you're going to get the public to start drinking it. You know, whether that be a group in San Francisco of fellow wine lovers or whether that be in New York City. I mean, who knows? I'm not on their PR team. They want to put me on that. I will certainly help them figure out a few more options so they can, you know, start getting Virginia wine out there. But I think they're on the right track. I think they're definitely making strides. You know, I ran into one of their reps at the Wine Bloggers Conference, and granted, that was another area of winos alike, but I was not put on to Virginia wines yet. And if it wasn't for this young woman named Mary Catherine who put a bottle of Potomac Point in my hand, I would not have known that that was a really great quality wine. So I definitely think there's potential. You know, there's just a lot of work that needs to be done like anyone. They're an underdog right now, so they've definitely got room to move up the ranks.
It's true. I remember Mary Catherine.
Let me jump in here, and I know Mary Catherine. She is a doll, and she does a great job of promoting our industry here. I think some of the problem is not the work that she and her organization, VirginiaWine.org, do. I think a lot of, or the Virginia Wine Board, I think a lot of the problem is the winemakers and wineries themselves. We're basically at an economic equilibrium here where a winemaker can make his wine in Virginia. People in Virginia are homers for Virginia wine. They will buy all of the wine that winemaker can make. So there's no impetus to expand and to get wine outside of the state lines. As a matter of fact, without getting direct ship from wineries, you can only get Virginia wine in the states that actually immediately border Virginia in retail locations.
And I'll stand behind that because I know as a wine...
You can get them in San Francisco at the Barrel Room.
Yes.
Well, I salute you and toast you for that, Sarah. Thank you.
And ForgottenGrapes.com, I know, carries a few excellent Virginia wines, but I can say as a retailer, it is hard to find distributors out here in California that carry wines from Virginia. They're few and far between, and they do tend to be a little expensive. And just finishing up on this note, I'll also say that what it sounds like with Virginia wine, with so much of it being bought up at home, is similar to a region down here in Southern California called Temecula, which is not as well known to people outside of Southern California. The quality has been a bit stagnant because so much of it is sold to, as we call them, the bro packs and the she packs who roll in every weekend in their limos and basically buy up the stock. All right, let's quickly get out of this question. We'll start with you, Jules. One quick sentence, one piece of advice to help Virginia wineries promote their product nationwide. What would you give them?
Find a public figure.
Find a public figure. All right. Sarah, one piece of advice for Virginia?
Put the wine in the hands of the common public.
All right. And last but not least, we'll turn to our Virginia wine man for his last word on it. Stub?
Promote the single varietal petite Bordeaux's that we can make in this state. They are amazing and can be even better.
Excellent. And I will actually add to what Stub said and said that Virginia should be focusing on Petit Verdot, Viognier, and Cab Franc. If they really stuck like Oregon did with Pinots and Chardonnays, if they stuck with Verdot, Cab Franc, and Viognier, I think they'd really, really have something there. Now, before we move on to our last question of the night, I just want to give a quick shout out to, if you can see it on the shirt, the Roadrunner Ridge Winery, which is actually just south of Temecula in the Rainbow area down here in Southern California. They make some fantastic wines and were nice enough to send a shirt along with some of their samples of their bottles. So thank you to the folks at the Roadrunner Ridge Winery. Check it out if you have never heard of it. I think you'll really enjoy the wines. And of course, if you own a winery out there and are interested in having us give you a little plug for your shirt, email us at spinthebottle@forgottengrapes.com. Let us know, and we'd love to have you send us a shirt to plug on the show. All right, last but certainly not least, our final question of the evening. And given that we are so close to Halloween, I thought we would talk about Halloween. So Halloween is a little over a week away, and while not always thought of as a wine-centric holiday as opposed to Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, or even Valentine's Day, if you're going to be putting on an embarrassing costume or taking your kids out to trick or treat, odds are you're going to need some fermented libations to get you through the night. So, panel of experts, let me ask you, what is your choice for wine this Halloween? And I want to start off with you, Miss Sarah. What are you going to be drinking on October 31st?
Well, it depends on how much I have in my pocket, but if I have quite a nice full pocket, I will be drinking the Auguste Cornas because it's very nice and spicy, and it's very dark and rich. And here in San Francisco, it's incredibly cold and foggy, and so I feel that it's a perfect wine for Halloween. If I don't have so much in my pocket, I think I'm going to go a little crazy and drink a Lekovice Blaufränkisch from the Czech Republic that I happen to have in my cellar. And it's quite incredible, and pumpkin spice and allspice and cinnamon and just fantastic. So it's very festive for a holiday like Halloween.
Interesting choice with the Blaufränkisch. I typically think of that as a Thanksgiving wine, but Jules, for Halloween, what is your drink of choice?
I am going for a 2011 Moscato DSD from the Castello de Poggio, I think they would say, in the province of Asti and Piedmont. And I chose this. Friend passed it along to me, so I thought it appropriate.
And she brings the bottles with her.
It's sweet with, well, of course. So it's sweet with refined fruit, and I just thought that it was best for it's equally straightforward in the mouth, and so I felt it was appropriate for Halloween. And all the little kiddies going around with their candy, I want a little something sweet in my glass.
It is certainly a candy-style wine with a little bit of sweet, but I wonder if it's just big and hefty enough to counteract those cooler temperatures. Although in LA, you're looking at probably mid-80s for Halloween.
Oh, it depends. Right now we're going through another heat wave, so hopefully that passes. But who's to say you can't just go into the club or into a nice cool house and get that feeling of Halloween on the East Coast?
Good point. All right, Stub, your Halloween wine of choice.
Well, it's going to depend on who is here at the Garage Bar at Cork and be handing out candy to the youngins coming by. If it's my choice, I'm probably going to go with a Napa Cab, probably a Chateau Chevalier with a horse right on the bottle. And if the close neighbors are here without with their child, the wife is French and the man is every bit of Francophile, so I'll probably open an 09 Bordeaux of their choosing because I'm a good host.
Very, very nice. I am going to be pouring the Twisted Oak 2008 River of Skulls Mourvedre. If you've never seen it, beautiful dark black bottle with a bright, bright red skull on the label. Perfect for Halloween. Scares the hell out of the children, but goes down so smooth and easy. Beautiful, beautiful wine to go with. Since we are getting a bit low on time, we are going to move directly into our final rants and a little bit of a themed rant for this last question. So since we're on the subject of Halloween, why don't you tell us in 30 seconds or less about your scariest wine experience ever? And we are going to start with Jules. Jules, you've got 30 seconds, my dear.
I'm going to leave names out of this one, but I was at a Cabernet wine tasting not too long ago, and I had the pleasure of sipping several wonderful wines from around the world with a master sommelier, and he decided that he wanted to pick me out and come with me to every station and see what I thought of each bottle of wine that I was tasting. I've never been so scared in my entire life, but luckily I did pretty well. So, my palate that was keen of Philip Baron de Rothschild and Los Vascos did me well that evening.
Excellent. That would be a frightening experience to go through. Sarah, how about you? Scariest wine story you've got?
Okay, so since I'm drinking a Sauterne, I figured this would be fitting. So it's not exactly about a wine, but it is about wine grapes. I was doing a vintage in Bordeaux in 2008, and I went and visited a Sauterne winery during the picking. And so the pickers were coming up with their bins full of these very interesting-looking mummified, shriveled, moldy grapes. And the winemaker put one in my hand and said, "Eat this." And I looked kind of horrified at what was in my hand, but I said, "Sure." And I ate it, and it was delicious. It tasted like Sauterne, and that wasn't the scary part. However, I then looked at the bin and saw it crawling with many, many slimy, fat worms. And I said, "What do you do with those?" And they said, "Oh, the caterpillars. Well, they add body to the wine. This will be a very good vintage for Sauterne." And it was the truth. They put the caterpillars in the wine, and that was scary.
Now, were they actual caterpillars or were they maggots? Because it is noble rot, as they say.
They looked like, almost like silkworms, but they were caterpillars that were kind of fat and slimy.
Boy, that sure sounds like
maggots. And they
maggots.
are in my glass of... Too big to be maggots.
Yeah,
but they are in my glass of Sauterne, and this has very nice body, so I guess maybe it was a year full of caterpillars. I don't know.
I guess it's the Bordeaux way of drinking the worm. Stub, your scariest wine story that you've got in your arsenal.
Wow. Well, mine goes back to when I was in the Marine Corps. I was in Bangkok with a sergeant major, and we woke up in a hotel room after drinking a lot of local plum wine.
You too?
In the window jumps Ben Affleck. He's got Kelly Ripa under one arm and a Komodo dragon under the other. It was crazy. No, my actual scariest moment with wine was the first time and each subsequent time I've had to taste a single varietal Chamberson.
Brutal. Since we're getting low on time, I don't want to scare the audience anymore, but let's just say mine involves New Year's Eve and the complete misnomer and abomination against life called almond champagne. It was horrifying. All right, well, that's going to bring an end to tonight's episode of Spin the Bottle. I want to once again thank our panelists for some lively and fascinating debate. In San Francisco, Sarah Trubnick from the Barrel Room San Francisco. Out in D.C., Mr. Cork Envy himself, Stub. And, of course, the Vinio Vixen, the wine writer for Clear Channel Radio's The Dish, Jules Gauvin. Thank you all for being here this time. Cheers to all y'all. Salud to you. Cheers. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time with a brand new episode of Spin the Bottle. So until then, get your scariest wine out there for Halloween and insert your own pithy wine aphorism here. Good night, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.
Bye.
Good night.